Before you move on, pause. Not because something dramatic is about to happen, but because something subtle is trying to reach you. This message may feel quiet, almost ordinary at first, yet it carries the power to shift how you speak to yourself, how your body responds, and how gently you move through the rest of your life. You might think you've heard messages like this before. Encouragement, reassurance, soft words meant to calm the heart. But the truth is, timing matters. A message can be correct and still miss you until the exact moment you are ready to receive it. This may be that moment. So many people live with an invisible pressure, a constant inner voice saying, asterisk, be better, do more, fix yourself, asterisk. Over time, that voice becomes tension in the body, fatigue in the mind, heaviness in the heart. You learn to live with it, not realizing how much it costs you. This message is not here to push you forward. It is here to invite you inward, to remind you that your body is listening to every thought you repeat, that your cells respond not to effort, but to kindness. And that healing begins when the inner dialogue finally softens. Think of the moments you dismiss small aches, quiet sadness, the sense that something feels off but you can't explain why. Those moments are not interruptions, they are invitations. Signals asking you to listen differently, to respond with compassion instead of correction. You may feel tempted to skim past this, to save it for later, to assume you'll come back when you have more time. But later is often when the message is needed most and heard least. Right now, your attention is the doorway, and what you allow in can change how you feel inside. Listen slowly. Let each idea settle before the next arrives. You don't need to agree with everything. You only need to stay present. This is not about information, it is about resonance, about letting your system recognize safety, perhaps for the first time in a while. Do not skip this, not because of urgency, but because of care. You are worthy of messages that soothe rather than strain you. And when you allow this one to land, gently and fully, it may change more than you expect, starting from the inside out. I want you to know right from the beginning that this message is not here to impress you. It is not here to convince you of anything. It is here because something in you has been listening for a different tone, a tone that does not rush, a tone that does not demand improvement, a tone that feels like recognition. So many messages in life arrive loudly. They shout for attention. They promise urgency. They push for action. This one is different. It comes quietly because the body responds to quiet more deeply than to force. The body opens when it does not feel chased. You may not have realized you were waiting for this message. Most people do not. They live with a constant background tension and assume it is normal. Tight shoulders, a jaw that never quite rests, a breath that stays shallow even in moments of calm. The body adapts so well that we forget how much effort it takes to hold itself together. This message matters because it interrupts that effort. The body has been listening to every thought you repeat, even the ones you dismiss as harmless, especially those. Thoughts like, I should be further along by now, or I need to get myself together, or once this is fixed, I can finally relax. These thoughts sound reasonable to the mind, but the body hears pressure. Pressure accumulates quietly. It does not always announce itself with pain. Sometimes it shows up as fatigue that never fully lifts, or a sense of heaviness you cannot explain. Over time, this pressure becomes the way you live, and you stop noticing how much it costs. That is why this message is more important than you think. It is not bringing something new into your life. It is reminding you of something you forgot, that your body does not need to be corrected in order to soften. It needs to be heard. Many people wait for something dramatic before they listen, an illness, a breakdown, a moment when the body finally says, I cannot go on like this. But the body speaks long before that. It speaks softly at first, through small aches, through quiet sadness, through the sense that something feels off, even when everything looks fine. Those are not interruptions. They are invitations. This message is here to help you respond sooner, not later. Because when you listen early, life does not need to shout. And listening early can save years, years of strain, years of pushing, years of living slightly clenched without realizing it. I have seen people transform simply because they stopped arguing with these quiet signals. They did not overhaul their lives. They did not force change. They simply changed how they listened. And the body responded with relief. Others noticed before they did. You seem calmer, people would say. You feel different. What had changed was not their circumstances. It was their inner dialogue. The body finally felt included. The body listens constantly. It listens when you speak kindly to yourself, and it listens when you criticize yourself in passing. There is no neutral language inside the body. Every thought carries a tone. And tone matters more than content. This is why effort so often fails. Effort speaks in a harsh tone, even when the words sound positive. I must heal. I need to fix this. I can't afford to feel this way. The body hears urgency. Urgency feels like danger. This message carries a different tone. It says you do not need to push right now. And the body recognizes that immediately. Shoulders drop slightly, breath shifts, not because anything was solved, but because safety was offered. Safety is the doorway to healing. Many successful people learned this only after years of exhaustion. They achieved goals, built lives, helped others, yet lived with constant inner pressure. When they finally softened their inner voice, they did not lose momentum. They gained clarity. Their energy returned. Their presence changed. Others experienced them differently. They seemed steadier, less rushed, more grounded. Trust grew around them naturally because a body at ease communicates reliability without words. This message is not asking you to stop caring. It is asking you to stop punishing yourself in the name of care. You may think you have heard messages like this before. Encouragement, reassurance, gentle words meant to calm. But timing matters. A message can be true for years before it is received. The body opens only when it feels ready. If you are hearing this now, it is because something in you is ready. Readiness does not always feel like confidence. Often it feels like fatigue, like being tired of trying so hard, like quietly wondering if there is another way. That wondering is wisdom. This message is more important than you think because it meets you at that moment, the moment when effort no longer feels noble but heavy. The moment when pushing feels less like strength and more like self-abandonment. I want you to know that nothing has gone wrong because you feel this way. You are not weak. You are becoming aware. Awareness is gentle. It does not force change. It invites it. When you begin to speak to yourself differently, even slightly differently, the body responds. It does not argue. It does not question your motives. It simply receives the tone and adjusts. I have watched people release years of tension not because they finally understood their past, but because they stopped attacking themselves in the present. That shift alone changed their health, their relationships, their sense of ease. This is how years are saved. Years not spent bracing. Years not spent fighting yourself. Years not spent waiting for permission to rest. This message matters because it gives you that permission now. You may feel tempted to skim past it, to save it for later, to assume you already know this. But knowing is not the same as allowing. The body changes through allowance, not information. Stay here with the message a little longer. Let it land. Let it repeat itself gently in different ways. Repetition is not weakness. Repetition is how the body learns trust. When the same gentle idea arrives again and again, the nervous system begins to believe it. And Belief changes posture, breath, and chemistry. Change happens quietly, without effort. This message does not demand agreement. It does not ask you to feel better immediately. It only asks you to listen without judgment. That alone is enough to begin. I want to offer you a gentle affirmation that belongs here, not as a command, but as a reassurance. I am allowed to listen to myself. Say it softly, or simply feel it. Notice how your body responds. There is no right reaction. The listening itself is the work. As you continue with this message, you may begin to notice how often you rush yourself, how often you correct instead of comfort, how often you withhold kindness until conditions improve. This message interrupts that habit, and once interrupted, the habit does not return as easily. You begin to notice when pressure appears. You catch it sooner. You choose differently more often. That is how a life changes, not through dramatic effort, but through repeated moments of gentleness. This message is more important than you think because it changes the direction of your inner life. And the inner life shapes everything else. You do not need to remember every word that follows. You only need to remember the feeling of being spoken to kindly. The body remembers feelings far longer than sentences. Let that be enough for now. This message has reached you, and something in you has already begun to soften. That is not an accident. I want to speak now about something you live inside every day, often without noticing it. Your inner voice, not the one you use when you encourage others, but the one that speaks when no one else is listening. The one that comments quietly on your feelings, your body, your pace, your worth. This voice creates the atmosphere your body lives in. Many people believe their stress comes from circumstances, from responsibilities, relationships, or uncertainty. But I have seen again and again that two people can live through the same circumstances and have completely different experiences in their bodies. The difference is not the situation, it is the tone of the inner voice. When the inner voice is harsh, the body never rests. Even during moments of quiet, the body remains alert, waiting for the next correction. Over time, this constant readiness becomes fatigue, tension, and heaviness that seem to have no clear cause. The inner voice often believes it is being helpful. It says things like, "You should do better," or "You can't fall apart now," or "Once you fix this, you'll be okay." These words sound practical, even responsible. But the body hears pressure, not support. Pressure tells the body it is not safe to pause. I want you to notice how often your inner voice speaks in the language of urgency, how often it withholds kindness until conditions improve, how often it treats rest as something to be earned rather than allowed. This voice did not appear by accident. It learned its tone long ago. Perhaps it was modeled. Perhaps it was adopted during times when you had to be strong. It once served a purpose. But what once protected you may now be exhausting you. The body does not respond well to constant correction. Correction keeps the nervous system alert. The body tightens to prepare for judgment, even when that judgment comes from within. I have seen people who lived with loving outer lives, kind to others, generous, patient, yet spoke to themselves in ways they would never tolerate from anyone else. Their bodies reflected that contradiction. They were tired, tense, and confused by their own discomfort. When the inner voice softens, the body responds almost immediately. Not dramatically, but noticeably. A breath deepens. A muscle releases. The body feels less watched. This is why this message matters so much. It invites you to notice not just what you think, but how you speak inside. The inner voice creates a constant environment. And environments shape behavior, health, and resilience over time. People who live with a kind inner voice recover faster from stress. They forgive themselves more easily. They do not carry yesterday's strain into today as often. This is not because they avoid difficulty. It is because their bodies are not under constant internal pressure. Others often describe these people as steady, trustworthy, and calm. They may say, "You don't seem to panic," or "You handle things well." What they are sensing is not perfection. It is self-respect. Self-respect begins with how you speak to yourself. I want you to understand that changing the inner voice does not mean silencing it. It means changing its relationship with the body. Instead of commanding, it reassures. Instead of correcting, it listens. This shift alone can save decades of wear. Think of how many years are lost arguing with yourself, telling yourself you should be different, telling yourself you cannot rest yet, telling yourself you must endure just a little longer. These messages do not motivate the body. They exhaust it. The body thrives on reassurance. When the inner voice says, "It's okay to feel this," the body relaxes slightly. When it says you are allowed to move slowly, the nervous system settles. These are not indulgences. They are signals of safety. Safety is what allows healing. I have known people who achieved great success once they stopped punishing themselves internally. Their outer lives did not fall apart. In fact, they became clearer, more focused, and more present. Their energy returned because it was no longer being drained by inner conflict. Others noticed their presence change. They seemed less rushed, less reactive, more at ease. This is because a calm inner environment creates a calm outer expression. The inner voice matters more than circumstances because circumstances change, but the voice stays with you everywhere. If the voice is harsh, there is no refuge. If the voice is kind, even difficult moments feel manageable. This message invites you to make that voice a place the body wants to live. You may think you already know this, but knowing is not the same as practicing. The body responds to repetition, not insight. Each time you choose a gentler phrase instead of a harsh one, you are changing the environment. Each time you soften your inner tone, the body notices. This is not about being positive. It is about being kind. There is a great difference. Positive language spoken with pressure feels false. Kind language spoken with honesty. The body responds to what feels real. I want to offer you a gentle affirmation suited for this moment, something that does not demand change, only presence. I speak to myself with kindness. Say it without forcing belief. Let it be an intention rather than a rule. Notice how the body responds to the tone. You may notice resistance at first. That is all right. The body may not trust kindness yet. Trust grows through consistency. This is why this message can save years. When the inner voice changes, the body no longer lives under constant strain. Stress does not accumulate the same way. Recovery happens sooner. Peace becomes accessible. People who live this way often say they feel lighter, even when life remains complex. The weight that lifted was not circumstance. It was self-pressure. The inner voice does not need to disappear. It needs to become a companion instead of a supervisor. When you speak to yourself as you would to someone you love, the body listens differently. Healing becomes possible without effort. This is not something you perfect. It is something you practice. And practice does not require judgment. It requires willingness. This message matters because it gives you permission to practice kindness toward yourself now, not later, not once things improve, now. And that choice made repeatedly changes the course of a life. You are not weak for needing gentleness. You are wise for offering it. The body has been waiting for this tone. And now it is beginning to listen. That is enough for today. I want to speak now about something many people only understand in hindsight. The body speaks long before it breaks down. Long before it demands attention, it whispers first. It nudges. It asks quietly. And when those early messages are ignored, it learns to speak louder. This message is more important than you think because it arrives before life has to interrupt you. Most people are not unkind to themselves on purpose. They are simply busy. They learn to push past small signals because there is always something else to attend to, a responsibility, a promise, a task that feels more urgent than rest. Over time, listening is postponed again and again. The body adapts to being ignored. It tightens, it holds, it carries strain silently. And because it adapts so well, you begin to believe this constant tension is just how life feels. But adaptation is not the same as health. The body speaks through subtle sensations first. A heaviness you cannot explain, a tiredness that sleep does not fully restore, a feeling of being slightly disconnected from yourself. These are not signs of weakness. They are messages asking for care. When these messages are met with kindness, they soften. When they are dismissed, they gather strength. I have seen people wait until exhaustion forced them to stop, until illness required attention, until life created a pause they could no longer avoid. They would often say, "I should have listened sooner," and they were right. Listening sooner saves years, years of pushing through discomfort, years of living with quiet pain, years of believing rest must be earned through collapse. This message invites you to listen now, while the signals are still gentle. Listening does not mean analyzing every sensation. It means noticing without judgment. It means responding with curiosity instead of correction. It means asking, "What do I need right now?" and being willing to hear the answer. The body often asks for very simple things: a pause, a softer pace, a kinder thought. These requests may seem small, but they change everything. I have known people who changed the direction of their lives simply because they honored these small requests. They rested when they first felt tired instead of waiting for burnout. They spoke kindly to themselves when emotions surfaced instead of pushing them away. Their lives unfolded with less drama because they listened early. Others noticed the difference. They seemed balanced, self-aware, grounded. They did not wait for crisis to care for themselves. This quiet self-respect made them trustworthy to themselves and to others. Listening early also changes how you experience challenge. Challenges still appear, but they do not overwhelm. The body has reserves because it is not constantly depleted. Resilience grows naturally when rest is allowed. Many people confuse listening with indulgence. They believe that responding to the body will make them lazy or unproductive, but the opposite is true. A body that feels heard works more efficiently. Energy flows instead of being forced. I want you to know that rest is not a reward for finishing everything. Rest is a requirement for living well. The body does not negotiate this truth. It only adapts until it cannot. Listening early prevents that breaking point. This message is important because it gives you permission to pause before collapse, to soften before pain becomes loud, to choose care before crisis. People who live this way often say they feel more connected to themselves. They trust their inner guidance. They stop overriding their needs. And because of that, life feels less overwhelming. Others experience them as present and grounded. They are not rushing through conversations. They are not constantly distracted by inner strain. They listen well because they listen to themselves. The body speaks through mood as well. Irritability, sadness, or numbness often appear when something needs attention. These are not flaws to be corrected. They are signals to be acknowledged. When you listen to these signals early, they do not need to escalate. The body does not need to shout when it feels heard. This is how years are saved. By responding to whispers instead of waiting for alarms. I want you to reflect gently on how often you tell yourself to keep going when you feel tired. How often you dismiss discomfort because it seems inconvenient. These habits were learned, they can be unlearned. Listening does not require a dramatic life change. It begins with moments, moments of pause, moments of softness, moments of choosing not to push. I have seen people who once lived in constant strain discover a new rhythm, a rhythm that includes action and rest. effort and ease, movement and stillness. This rhythm feels sustainable because it honors the body. The body loves rhythm. It thrives when it knows what to expect, when rest is part of the pattern, not an emergency measure. This message invites you into that rhythm now. You do not need to wait for permission. You do not need to wait until things get worse. You are allowed to listen before life forces you to stop. I want to offer you a gentle affirmation that supports this practice of early listening. I honor what my body is telling me. Say it softly. Let it feel like respect, not obligation. Respect changes everything. When the body feels respected, it relaxes. When it relaxes, healing accelerates. This is not something you force. It happens naturally. Listening early also changes how you age. Tension that does not accumulate does not harden the body. Stress that is released does not settle into long-term discomfort. You feel lighter as the years pass, not heavier. This is how people save decades of health and peace, not by avoiding life, but by responding to it wisely. You may still have moments when you ignore signals. That is all right. Habits take time to change. What matters is that you are learning to notice sooner. This message matters because it trains awareness. Awareness is the beginning of compassion. Compassion is the beginning of healing. You are not behind because you are learning this now. You are early enough. The body is grateful when it is finally heard. Life responds when you listen. And by listening now, gently and without judgment, you change the future before it needs to correct you. That is the quiet power of this message. I want to speak now about what happens when this message is no longer something you listen to, but something you live with. A message can comfort you for a moment and still leave your habits untouched. But when a message is truly received, it begins to change the way you move, speak, decide, and rest. That is when its real power appears. This message is more important than you think because it does not ask for belief. It asks for relationship. A relationship with yourself that unfolds quietly over time. One where kindness becomes familiar, not occasional. Many people feel relief when they hear gentle words, but then return immediately to old patterns. They rush again. They criticize again. They withhold rest again, not because they failed, but because habits are strong. Habits were built through repetition, and they soften the same way. This is why this message must live with you, not just pass through you. When you begin to let this message shape how you live, the first change is often in pace. You stop rushing quite as much. You pause before reacting. You give yourself an extra moment before deciding. These pauses are not weakness. They are wisdom returning. The body notices immediately. A slower pace tells the nervous system that danger has passed. Breath deepens, muscles soften, thoughts slow. Life begins to feel less like something you must endure and more like something you can participate in. I have seen people change their entire lives through this simple shift. They did not quit everything or retreat from responsibility. They simply stopped demanding that everything happen faster than it could be lived. Others noticed their presence change. They seemed steadier, less hurried, more available. People felt listened to around them. This is because when you stop rushing yourself, you stop rushing others too. This message changes how you make choices. Instead of choosing from fear or urgency, you begin to choose from clarity. You ask yourself gently, what feels right now? And you listen for the answer without argument. This kind of listening saves years. Years spent forcing decisions that were not aligned. Years spent committing to paths that drained you. Years spent ignoring inner guidance until life intervened. People who learn to live this way often appear confident without being rigid. They are not constantly explaining themselves. They trust their timing. Others sense that trust and respond to it. This message also changes how you relate to effort. You still act. You still care. But you stop proving your worth through exhaustion. You rest when rest is needed. You move when movement feels clear. Life feels less adversarial. I want you to know that this does not make you passive. It makes you present. Presence is far more powerful than force. When this message becomes part of your daily life, you stop waiting for breakdowns to justify rest. You stop waiting for permission to be kind to yourself. You no longer require suffering as proof that you deserve ease. This alone saves decades. So many people live as if life is something that must be survived first, enjoyed later. This message reverses that belief. It teaches you that enjoyment, rest, and gentleness are not rewards. They are necessities. You may notice that your body responds with gratitude. Sleep improves. Digestion softens. Emotions move more freely. These are not miracles. They are natural responses to reduced pressure. Others often say, "You seem lighter," or "You seem more yourself." What they are noticing is that you are no longer carrying constant inner weight. This message also changes how you experience difficulty. Difficult moments still arise, but they do not define you. You meet them with steadiness instead of panic. You recover faster because you are not adding self-judgment to the experience. This is how life becomes sustainable. When kindness becomes your default response, challenges do not accumulate into long-term strain. They pass through, they teach, they leave. I have known people who once lived in constant self-correction learn to trust themselves deeply. Their inner voice became an ally instead of an enforcer. And because of that, their outer lives reflected more ease, clarity, and success. Success that did not cost them their health. Success that did not require self-violence. Success that felt livable. This message does not remove ambition. It removes punishment. You begin to notice when you are pushing unnecessarily. You stop earlier, you rest sooner, you listen more carefully. These small adjustments change the trajectory of a life. This is how 10 years are saved. This is how 20 years are saved. This is how 30 years are saved. Not by doing more, but by suffering less. I want you to understand that letting this message shape your life does not mean you will never forget it. You will forget. Old habits will return at times. That is natural. What matters is that you recognize them sooner and return gently. Returning is part of the practice. Each time you return to kindness, the body recognizes the path more quickly. Ease becomes easier. Trust becomes familiar. This is how habits change without force. I want to offer you an affirmation that belongs here, not as a rule, but as a companion. I allow kindness to guide my life. Say it softly. Let it feel like an agreement rather than a promise. Over time, you may notice that you do not need to repeat affirmations as often. The message has become embodied. You live it without thinking about it. This is the true success of this work. You move differently, you choose differently, you speak differently to yourself and to others. Life feels less heavy. Not because it became easier, but because you stopped carrying it in a harsh way. This message is more important than you think because it changes your relationship with time. You stop racing against it. You live inside it. When you live this way, the future does not feel threatening. You trust yourself to meet it, and trust removes fear. I want you to know that nothing about you needs fixing. You were never broken. You adapted. You survived. And now you are learning a gentler way to live. That learning is enough. As this message settles into your life, let it guide you quietly. Let it soften your pace. Let it shape your choices. Let it remind you when you forget. You do not need to announce this change. You do not need to defend it. You simply live it. And as you do, you may realize that the most important changes happen without effort, without noise, and without struggle. This message was never meant to push you forward. It was meant to bring you home. You listened. And that listening has already changed more than you know. That is why this message is more important than you think. Now that you have reached this place, I want you to notice something very important. There is no sense of urgency here. Nothing is asking you to change, decide, or become anything else. This is not a moment of instruction. It is a moment of recognition. Recognition that something inside you has already shifted. You may not be able to name what has changed, and that is perfectly all right. The most meaningful changes rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly, like a softening you only notice after it has happened. The body understands long before the mind explains. I want you to know that you do not need to carry this message forward with effort. You do not need to remember every idea or repeat every word. What matters has already been felt. And what is felt leaves a deeper imprint than what is memorized. For so long, you may have lived as though life required constant vigilance, as though relaxing your attention would cause something to unravel. That belief kept you alert, it kept you responsible, it kept you moving forward, and it also kept you tired. There is no judgment in that. You did what you knew how to do. But now, something else is becoming possible. You are learning that awareness does not have to be sharp to be effective. It can be gentle. That kindness does not weaken you. It steadies you. That listening does not slow life down. It prevents life from having to stop you. This is why this message mattered. Not because it added something to you, but because it removed something you were never meant to carry, constant inner pressure. When that pressure eases, the body responds almost immediately. Breath changes, muscles soften. The nervous system settles into a rhythm that feels familiar, even if it has been forgotten for a long time. This settling is not something you must protect. It does not disappear because you return to daily life. It lives underneath activity, available whenever you pause long enough to feel it again. You may notice, over the coming days, that you respond differently to moments that once felt overwhelming. You may pause sooner. You may speak more kindly to yourself. You may recover more quickly after stress. These are not small things. These are signs of trust taking root. Trust does not need to be dramatic to be real. I want you to understand that there will still be moments when old habits return. Moments when you rush yourself, criticize yourself, or ignore what your body is asking for. That does not undo anything. Habits loosen gradually. Awareness returns gently. Each time you notice and choose differently, even once you strengthen a new pattern. That is how change becomes lasting. People who live this way often say they feel more at home in themselves. Not perfect, not finished, simply more settled. Life no longer feels like something they must outrun or manage constantly. It becomes something they can move through with presence. Others notice this too. They may say you seem calmer, steadier, more grounded. They may feel more at ease around you. A body that is not under constant pressure communicates safety without words. This is not because you tried harder. It is because you stopped pushing. I want you to know that you are allowed to rest in this understanding. You do not need to turn it into a goal. Goals create pressure. This is not a goal. It is a relationship. A relationship with yourself that continues quietly, one gentle moment at a time. You are allowed to trust that you will remember what you need when you need it. The body remembers kindness. It remembers safety. It remembers the feeling of being spoken to gently. That feeling is enough. You may find that over time, you no longer need reminders in the same way. You do not reach for reassurance as often because reassurance has become internal. You speak to yourself differently. You listen sooner. You rest without guilt. This is not something you force. It happens naturally when inner pressure dissolves. I want to leave you with this understanding, not as a rule, but as a truth you can return to. You were never meant to live at war with yourself. Life is not asking you to be tougher, faster, or more resolved. It is asking you to be present, to notice, to respond with care. And when you do, life responds in kind. If you ever feel lost again, you do not need to search for answers. You can return to the body, to the breath, to the sensation of being supported in this moment. That is where clarity lives. You do not need to rush back into doing. You can carry this softness with you. Let it inform your pace. Let it shape your choices. Let it remind you when you forget. Nothing more is required. You listened, you allowed, you stayed present. That is enough. Life loves you. Your body knows it now. And you are free to move forward, not with effort, but with trust.